Here, let me fix that. Before we get right into this video, I had to fix your thinking cap just in case we were going to get any misconceptions about what this video is really talking about. And so, white nationalism doesn't always look like what you think it does. Sometimes there's no swastikas, and sometimes there's no skinheads. And sometimes nobody openly tells you that they hate another race. Sometimes it starts with a question. Have you noticed how much America has changed? And that question is usually followed by another one. Why is nobody allowed to talk about it? This is where the conversation becomes incredibly important because modern white nationalism has learned how to talk. And more importantly, it has learned how to make more people listen. For decades, the public image of white supremacy was extremely obvious. You had the Ku Klux Klan, you had neo-Nazi organizations, you had skinhead movements openly display racist symbols. The ideology was visually recognizable before anyone even opened their mouths. But the internet created a problem for movements like these. Open hatred immediately limits the number of people willing to listen. So the language began to change. Conversations shifted towards demographics. Instead of explicitly targeting minorities, people started talking about preserving Western civilization. Instead of saying segregation, they could talk about freedom of association. Instead of describing racial displacement, they could warn about replacement. Instead of calling them white nationalists, some simply call themselves America First. The words changed, but critics and extremism researchers began asking whether the ideas underneath them had actually changed. This is where the concept of a political dog whistle becomes important. A dog whistle is language that can carry one meaning for the general public and a meaning for a specific political audience. To the average person, protect our heritage can sound completely harmless, but inside certain extremist communities, heritage can be used as a shorthand for racial identity, and context is everything. And the internet is extremely good at removing context. A 14-second video might show a crime being committed by an immigrant, and the headlines might emphasize where that person came from. The comments immediately begin filling with the same questions. Why does this keep happening? Why won't the media talk about this? How many more until people wake up? Notice that nobody in the conversation necessarily has to make an openly racist statement. The audience is encouraged to finish the thought themselves. This is what makes modern political rhetoric so effective. It can make a conclusion feel like your own discovery. And once you believe you discovered something yourself, you become much more emotionally attached to it. This is where the I got you style of political content enters the conversation. The creator doesn't present themselves as a politician. They present themselves as your friend. They tell you that they understand why you're frustrated. They tell you that you're not crazy for noticing things. They tell you everyone else is lying to you. And then they offer you an explanation. Maybe you can't afford an apartment because immigrants are taking resources. Maybe you can't find a job because diversity programs have placed merit. Maybe your neighborhood changed because political elites planned it. Maybe your country is disappearing because somebody wants it to disappear. And these are extremely complicated social problems, but extremist rhetoric often gives them extremely simple villains. And fear works especially when it's attached to a headline. One violent crime becomes evidence of invasion. One controversial school lesson becomes evidence of national indoctrination. One demographic statistics becomes evidence of replacement. One isolated video becomes proof that society is collapsing. The individual story may actually be real. The manipulation happens when that story is presented as proof of a much larger conspiracy without sufficient evidence. One of the clearest examples is the Great Replacement Conspiracy. The theory claims that native white populations are being deliberately replaced through immigration and demographic change. Variations of that idea have moved from fringe extremist communities into broader political discussions in the United States and Europe. Even the language surrounding immigration has started changing. Terms like remigration have received new political attention despite their established use in European far-right movements, and this is why language matters. An extremist idea does not need to become popular under its original name. It only needs to become popular in pieces. First you accept the fear, then you accept the framing, and then you accept the vocabulary, and eventually an idea that once sounded extreme starts sounding like a normal political conversation. White nationalism may have not disappeared from American politics. It may have simply learned how to speak to a larger audience, and sometimes the most powerful political movements are the ones that convince you they're not movements at all. But I swear it's the way, I'ma have to end it quick. Can't stay another day, then again I won't blame. Playing like a game till I end up in the grave. You see the pain all across my face. I can't take it anymore, about to blow my brains.